statslige opgaver til denne unge mand. Og nu beder jeg jer om at forstå, at det klogeste, vi kan gøre, er at give ham endnu mere myndighed.
After I was born, I went home to watch my TV. Everyone was nice and the smiles were so sparkly. I watched what made them happy and I watched what made them cry. I learned about toys and candy my mommy should buy. And the TV God watches over me, opens up my eyes, shows me how to see all around the world.
Welcome to Adaptation, where we talk about pieces of media, usually books, and the various ways their stories have been portrayed across other mediums, usually TV or movies. Today, I want to talk about an ancient Greek play that was turned into a TV movie in 1988. Euripides' Medea is a play about a woman who is betrayed by her husband and seeks vengeance by murdering those closest to him. With themes of despair, jealousy, feminism, and infanticide, it's not surprising that the play was adapted into a TV movie by Danish director Lars von Trier. Von Trier is known for his controversial works and for exploring through film aspects of humanity most people would probably shy away from. His 1988 Medea adaptation was based on a script by fellow Dane and acclaimed director and screenwriter Carl Theodor Dreyer, which was itself based on Euripides' play. The movie is only 76 minutes long and sticks closely to the major plot points of the play. However, the medium of film gives the movie the freedom to tell the story of Medea without the constraints of ancient Greek theater. Von Trier diverges from the source material in a number of places, with striking artistic visuals replacing long speeches and exposition. The result is a stripped-down version of the story that conveys the emotions of the characters through their actions and interactions more than through their words. With that being said, I think it's best to go through the movie chronologically, talking about the decisions von Trier made and thinking about how they affect the narrative of Medea. The film begins in a very different way than the play, where the play opens with Medea's female servant, her nurse, outside Medea's house, giving a long speech full of exposition about the history of Medea and her husband Jason of Golden Fleece fame. The first scene of the movie is Medea lying on a beach. There are shots of water, of Medea's hands, of the waves washing over her. The sense is that she is being submerged, consumed by the ocean. A low-angle shot of her rising up out of the water and gasping for air ends this sequence, and the story begins. Aegeus, king of Athens, calls out to Medea by name from his ship. This marks the first change in the actual narrative of the movie. In the play, Aegeus comes on stage from out of nowhere 600 lines in. It works in the play, but von Trier elevates the importance of Aegeus as a character, and it becomes necessary to establish who he is early on. Having him meet Medea, explain why he is in Corinth, and make it clear to the audience that he is a friend to Medea all in the beginning, makes his subsequent appearances more natural. Aegeus is on his way to see the oracle, desperate to find a cure for his inability to produce a child. Medea asks him to promise that she may always seek refuge in his country, which he does at once. In the play, this meeting comes after she has already spoken to Jason and Creon, and it has been made clear to the audience that some violence is inevitable. In the movie at this point, the audience is put in the same position as Aegeus, unsure what is going on or why she might be asking for sanctuary. Film Aegeus also agrees much more readily than his play counterpart. Aside from the dialogue in general being more concise than the flowing speeches of the play, he puts no conditions on the promise, as we will see later. He sails away, the camera submerges into the ocean, and the title card rolls. This title sequence takes the place of the nurse's exposition, and I think it's an effective way of delivering the information. In a few sentences, it tells the story of Jason and Medea, the Golden Fleece, Jason's betrayal of his family, and Medea's hatred for him. The nurse in the play also insinuates that Medea might do some harm to her children, the two sons she's had with Jason, and this is present here too, in the imagery of the title card, which depicts the two boys in silhouette hanging from a tree. If we didn't know before, we now have some idea why she might need to seek refuge. The written exposition stops just short of telling us that Jason has left Medea and his sons to marry the daughter of King Creon of Corinth. We get this information through a rather odd series of scenes depicting the girl he is to marry, Glauca, naked and attended by servants. Her father, Creon, gives voiceover narration explaining the political benefits of the marriage, and Jason is shown in some sort of underground cave surrounded by ancient-looking men, Creon and Glauca, all applauding him. This is completely original. Nothing similar happens in the play, and it really highlights the passive nature of Jason and the repulsiveness of the position he intends to assume. Jason does not achieve things for himself. He's guided to obtaining the fleece by Medea. He's shepherded into power by Creon and the Corinthian elders. This passivity is what leads to his downfall. He allows others to direct him into a position where he becomes trapped between his obligations to Medea, his desire for power, and feelings of responsibility for the state more than his own family. No matter how much he rages or explains how strong and powerful a man he is, the film portrays him in such a way that despite his masculinity, he looks impotent compared to Medea. So does Creon, for that matter, when he goes to tell Medea she is banished. But we'll get to that. I just want to highlight again how repulsive Von Trier makes the elders and Creon look in this scene. Dirty, shining faces, lit to show deep contrast in this muddy underground cave. The unreadable expressions, the repeated stone-faced applause. All of this is very different from where we see Medea, out in the open, in nature. By the end of this scene, we have an understanding of why Creon and Jason feel he must marry Glauca, and possibly even empathy for Jason, but no sympathy for their cause. As Glauca isn't shown in the play, there are some added scenes depicting her and Jason in a sort of tent or canopied area together at night. Jason makes sexual advances towards her, hesitant and almost awkward. She refuses to sleep with him until Medea is gone from the land, and he is made to sleep in another room, where he can see her silhouette thrown up onto the curtain. Aside from being visually captivating, this scene serves to further highlight Jason's impotence, his inability to act on the world by himself in a way that achieves what he wants. The fade from that scene, which ends with Jason reaching longingly towards her shadowy outline, to the next, showing Medea asleep, draped protectively over her two sons, goes a long way in terms of characterization and narrative development. Part of what I think makes this such a successful adaptation is Von Trier's sense of style and visual storytelling. Much of the dialogue and exposition of the play has been removed, and other new scenes not in the original have been added, but a large part of Von Trier's version of the story is told purely through the visuals, and I personally find that to be very effective. Because Medea is a complicated story and a complicated character. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this if you've gotten this far and still don't know. But she kills Glauca, kills Creon, and kills her two sons. It's horrifying and unforgivable. And yet, you can still sympathize with her. As she lays out how she has been treated, how hard it is for women in this society, how men can inflict so much pain on women and go unpunished or even benefit from it, you begin to see she isn't evil. There are strong arguments that can be made from both the play and the film that she loves her sons very much. But she kills them to strike back at Jason. Is it at all reasonable to think that Jason will be hurt by their deaths more than she will? Does Jason love the boys, or does his attachment come more from a place of pride? I don't know. I've read this play and seen this movie and tried to answer these questions for myself so many times and I still get lost. She's a complicated character and the play doesn't give all the answers in a straightforward way. Von Trier is able to depict the emotions of the story without using many words. You feel the things going on in this world, between these characters, even if you can't exactly explain what it is you're feeling or why. Medea is awoken and proceeds to give a version of one of the most important speeches from the play. This is where she explains how much Jason meant to her and asks why it is women must suffer so much. Women must submit themselves to men in body and deed. Women must stay loyal and obedient to their husbands. The picture she paints is a bleak one, where women are alone in the world, and at the mercy of the man they have been bound to. Men claim that by actions on the battlefield, by being the ones who put themselves in danger to keep women and children secure, that they are owed gratitude from women for that security, But Medea says she'd rather be a man.
Vil du hellere være en mand? Ja, også i krig. Eller bløde bag et skjold end føde mandens børn.
I'd rather bleed behind a shield than bearing a man's children. She is alone and longs for revenge. The scene where Creon tells Medea she is banished visually reinforces her power over him. In the play, their dialogue back and forth shows her subtly manipulating him into concession, despite his misgivings. He is right not to trust her, and is not being villainous or unreasonable in trying to banish her. It would have been the correct thing to do from his point of view. By playing to his emotions, she is able to secure one more day in the country, in which she will destroy Creon, Jason, and the princess. The movie presents this interaction in a swamp. Medea is picking berries from a water plant when Creon arrives, carried on a platform by servants. The landscape is obscured in thick mist, and characters move in and out of focus. Medea moves confidently, unhindered by the fog, while Creon is forced to dismount his litter and stumble through the mud, unable to find Medea. The camera focuses on Creon turning this way and that, while Medea's voice cuts clearly through the mist. This makes the audience observe the scene more or less from Creon's point of view, making the power dynamic here obvious. Creon's words are threatening, and Medea's feign weakness, but visually there is no mistaking which of the two is in control. After the meeting with Creon, Medea grinds up the berries, making a paste that will become the poison which kills Glauca and her father. Jason arrives to speak with her, and here again we see just how ineffectual he is, despite his words. He says things like, "I married her for your sake," and, "If only men could have children without the agency of women." Their meeting ends without resolving anything. As Jason leaves, Aegeus arrives, coming back from his visit with the oracle. This is the point in the play where Medea and Aegeus first meet. He tells her what the oracle said, as he is unable to understand the vague and mysterious advice. In fact, he tells Medea he rode by her house specifically because he believes in her wisdom in such matters. In direct opposition to the cowardly yet arrogant Jason, Aegeus is portrayed as confident in himself, but with humility and a knowledge of his own limits. He recognizes Medea as a full person with unique skills and wisdom, not as a woman interchangeable with any other. She tells him about the situation with Jason and promises a cure for his childlessness if she may sail away with him the next day. There are two important things to note in this scene. The first is that she uses the singular. "If I may sail with you tomorrow, I promise you children." The second is that this is the single biggest change in the movie from the play. In the original, Aegeus specifically stipulates that, while he offers her complete protection once in his lands, she must get there herself. He doesn't want to cause political problems by facilitating her leaving. This creates a problem adaptation-wise, as the end of the play is Medea flying off in a golden chariot, granted to her by her relative, the sun god. Not only would this be hard to do on film in a way that doesn't break the realism of the scene, it also would not be in keeping at all with the tone of the film. Von Trier presents the story of Medea, which is truly horrifying, in a way that feels genuine and realistic. Medea flying off in a golden chariot right after committing two unspeakable murders is so ridiculous that for a film adaptation aiming at realism, it's not worth considering. This problem is easily sidestepped by simply allowing Medea to leave with Aegeus. It is quite a large change from the original story, but I think it's one that benefits the movie very much. The scene ends with him telling her, "We sail at high water." Everything is now in place. She has her day, her poison, her escape, and a new home to escape to. All that is left is for the plan to be carried out. The other major change, aside from Medea's method of departure, is the way in which she kills Glauca and Creon. I find this change to be as negative as the first is positive. In fact, the one real flaw in this adaptation, the thing that keeps it from being almost perfect in my mind, is how Von Trier has Medea exact her revenge. In the play, she sends her children to the princess bearing a beautiful robe and a crown. Glauca puts them on and admires herself before being overcome by the poison, dying in terrible agony as she is consumed by fire. When Creon finds his daughter's body, he throws himself upon it and becomes stuck to it as the poison kills him too. All it takes is touch. The film has Medea just give a crown. Some dialogue between her and Jason tells us it's her bridal crown, and I think that is a nice touch, as it helps to convince Jason that Medea has accepted defeat. But the crown itself is not a beautiful work of gold. It's gray and comes to deadly-looking points. It's the sort of thing that you would look at and instinctively know better than to touch. Medea rubs poison on the spikes, puts it in a box, and sends it with Jason and the children. One of the sons actually takes it out of the box while riding towards Creon's castle, and scratches another horse in the stable as he dismounts. They give the crown to Glauca, and she scratches herself too. Then later we are told so did Creon. Making this crown the instrument of death gives Von Trier the opportunity to shoot a visually interesting scene following the horse as it breaks out of the stable and runs across the beach before collapsing and dying. But in all other ways, it's a very poorly thought out change. Medea is meant to be a brilliant and scheming character who lacks physical power, but overcomes her opponents through cunning and manipulation. There are so many points of failure with her plan in the movie that it's almost disrespectful to the character to attribute it to her. What if Jason touched the crown when he opened the box to look inside? What if her son, who took the crown all the way out and held it, had scratched himself or someone else by accident? What if someone had noticed what happened to the horse in time? What if Glauca had taken one look at the deadly-looking spikes and suspected danger, or had simply not found the crown attractive? What if she hadn't rubbed the spike on her face and very clumsily pricked her finger? What if Creon had known better than to somehow also cut himself on the very obviously dangerous spikes? There is so much wrong with this plan, and it is so clearly inferior to what Medea does in the play, that I find this change to be detrimental to the film. It undermines Medea's intelligence and creates negative feelings of disbelief or doubt in the viewer. It would not have been difficult to portray the original killing method on screen. Actually, Creon and Glauca's moments of death aren't shown in the film. We see Glauca prick her finger and we see the horse die, but news of Glauca and Creon's deaths comes in narration, while Medea takes her sons to a field. I find it somewhat odd that Von Trier adds the horse, which isn't in the play, doesn't show the death of Glauca, which is described in vivid detail in the play, and shows, unflinchingly, the deaths of Medea's sons, which originally happened out of sight of the audience. Now we're there. This is the core of the story of Medea. She is the woman who murdered, in cold blood, her 2 young boys. This part of the story still gives me a lot of trouble, beyond how disturbing it is. Does Medea love her sons? Von Trier seems to think so, as he goes out of his way to show moments of genuine tenderness between the boys and Medea. Does Jason? He doesn't seem to care while they're alive. Is Medea really hurting Jason more than she is herself? And if so, what does that say about her? My other feelings I find harder to put into words. It's an incredibly difficult scene. I'll just go over some of the changes Von Trier made, but I'm not able to make any definitive judgments on them. They raise even more questions for me that I can't find answers to. In the play, Medea takes the boys into her house and kills them with a knife. The audience hears their screams, but doesn't see anything. Whether this is because of practical effect limitations during that time period, or because it would have been beyond the pale to actually show a mother killing her sons, I don't know. As the title card has already foreshadowed, in Von Trier's film, Medea hangs her sons from a lone tree growing in a large open field. The most confusing thing about this scene by far is that one of the boys is on Medea's side. Either Von Trier or Dreyer made the decision to have the older boy tell his mother he understands what must be done, and when his younger brother gets scared and runs, the older boy chases him down and brings him back. They hang the younger boy together, and then the older turns to his mother and tells her she needs to help him.
Hjælp mig, mor.
He can't end his life alone. I don't know what to make of this change. I don't think it's bad. This is the culmination of Von Trier's interpretation of the story. But I don't understand this change, where it comes from, or what it means. The whole scene, being Lars von Trier's version of already famously disturbing source material, is very hard to watch, but I think it's also what sets this adaptation apart. The end of the movie, while completely different from the end of the play, is very well done. Jason, having discovered the death of his bride and father-in-law, rushes off to find Medea and his sons. Medea, meanwhile, is in Aegeus's boat, waiting with him and his men for the tide to carry them out. Jason finds the tree and is stunned. He's too late, and there's nothing he can do but alternate between rage and grief. He rides his horse through field and forest as though looking for something. The one responsible? An escape from this nightmare he has created? Here, too, he seems indecisive and impotent. His rage has no teeth. All he can do is lash out at air and try to avoid facing the fact that he's not the all-powerful man he thought he was. There are no words for the rest of the movie. The last words spoken are the last words of the older child. There is no music. For 8 minutes, there are just images and sounds. Medea's gasping breaths. Jason's horse. Birds. The ocean. Medea in the boat. For the entirety of the movie up until this point, Medea has been clothed in a dark, nondescript sort of dress covering her entire body, and a tight cap covering her hair completely. Only her face is really uncovered. This is in stark contrast to Glauca, who spends most of her screen time naked, and Jason, who wears a flashy silver tunic and a sword. Medea is drab, covered, hardly registering as specifically a woman. Her garb is dehumanizing in a way that is barely perceptible. Until the boat is drifting off to sea. Jason has lost. He didn't reach Medea before it left. He will never exact any revenge for what she has done. She is safe. That chapter of her life is over. The men begin to let the sails down, and the cloth falls between the camera and Medea, who has been sitting in the bow, stone-faced, totally distanced from the world around her. The camera cuts to a closer view of her, and the sailcloth falls again. Cut for the third time, just as she has removed the cap, letting out a head of long red hair, which, finally free, blows beautifully through the wind. Her expression has changed, and you can see the anguish grow on her face as she runs her hands through her hair. The music begins to play again, melancholy. For the first time to the audience, and for the first time in a long time to herself, she is now, finally, her own person. A real woman. I think the 8 minutes between the boy's last words and the moment Medea removes her cap perfectly encapsulates this film. Wordless, deprived of score, the images and little bits of sound drive home all the emotion found at the core of this tragic story. As a standalone movie, Lars von Trier's Medea is a relatively short, highly artistic film that is visually unique, but difficult to watch and perhaps to appreciate if you're not already familiar with the story. As an adaptation, it is not a completely faithful one-to-one recreation of the play, but for the most part, the artistic license taken makes the film better. The issue of the crown does hurt the story, but the ending is so well done, I think it more than makes up for any other shortcomings. The emotional complexity and general feel of the original story are presented in a skillful way, and I think that makes this one of the best adaptations of a classic I've ever seen.